Electronic Groove presents EG+ONE.
We're here to talk to Eelke Kleijn about his new Connected album, which came out last week. And so last Friday was the first time that you played it live.
Yes.
Yeah, how did that feel?
It went well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. Of course, I've done live sets in the past with different setups, and this was a completely new setup. But yeah, I was happy. The preparations went well, and then the night itself was good.
Yeah, well, I can attest to that because I was like raving on the dance floor. It was great. It was great to hear. So like some of the tracks that you have on the album, like I didn't expect to see. You included Transmissions on the album, which has obviously, been a massive hit, went into the Dutch Top 40, and but then there obviously you have all the new ones with all the, all the singers included. So, did you get nervous at all, like testing out some of those new tracks?
A little bit sometimes. Like it's always interesting to see how people will respond to new music, So a big part of my process when making an album is also trying it out on the dance floor and then seeing the response. And with this album being a little bit different sounding, it's more difficult to test out the tracks, because they don't always fit in a nightclub sort of vibe.
Right.
But I tested as much as possible. And some tracks I just never tested, and I just made them, and I was like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be, and that's it.
Like you've just consistently over the years, like releasing, a lot of tracks, and like, does that come naturally to you? Like, some people kind of struggle with, getting the next track out. I think from my perspective, it just seems like track after track, it's like consistently good. And
well, it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't struggle per se, but I do find it more difficult nowadays to produce tracks than say 20 years ago when I was just getting started, because I've seen so much and I've heard so much, and it gets more and more difficult to come up with original ideas. Yeah, and some people go sort of the easy way, and they have one big hit record, and then their next 10 records sound like that one big hit record.
Right.
And I always try to challenge myself and come up, for every track I try to come up with something I haven't done before. And that is difficult sometimes. Like there's definitely weeks or maybe even a month where you go without writing something which you think is good. But then in the end, I guess for other people don't really see that. They just see the end result, They don't see the hours that you put into the studio. So I do struggle a little bit more than I used to, but I'm still happy with the output.
You mentioned in your recent Connected documentary that you wanted to make something that was a little bit more timeless, and something that hopefully in 10 years we're still gonna love. What would be some of the albums that you feel are timeless that have influenced you?
Oh, that's a good question. Some of the 70s stuff that is still fresh today, like Fleetwood Mac, for instance, and there's definitely hints towards that on my new album. Sort of that straight groove that that is present in some tracks that definitely got inspired by that. And then I like to listen to a track like that and think like, oh wow, that groove is still so cool after 50 years. Let's try and start with something like that and then build it out. And so it is something I try with all my albums, to make them sound kind of timeless. I don't want them to sound too much like now, because they're going to be outdated in 10 years. But you never know if you succeed. If I listen to some of my first albums from 2007 and 2010, I feel like some tracks still stood the test of time really well, and then others I can hear like, oh yeah, that's like that sound from those times. But I guess that's just the way it is. It's really hard to achieve that with every track.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's always a big musical evolution. Like, back in probably the early 2000s, there was, the trancey, then the progressive, and then there was a huge deep house era, and then so how have you managed to float through all of it? Because I do see that some artists peak and then, you know, kind of slither away, and like some really do manage to stay. And so how have you been able just to continue and keep pushing?
It's a good question. I think one part of it is that I was always sort of professional in the sense that I never partied too much. I was in the studio 5 days a week, basically office hours. So I was always creating music, and then even on special days like holidays, I would often just go into the studio and write music. So I've been very sort of consistent in writing, but I've also tried to better my music all the time. And better is a strange word because music it's not something that's better or something, but
subjective.
Yeah, but I'm trying with every album and every track, trying to do something new, something that excites me, and also getting inspired by different people. Like I think in the early days, I was mostly inspired by progressive house, John Digweed, Sasha Hernan, and then at some point, I think who made a very big influence on me was Plex, because he, like when he sort of bust out onto the scene, his way of writing songs, it was much more song-based, a lot of vocals, and it was just arranged differently as well, and that really inspired me. Not so much in the sense that I wanted to do the exact same thing, but it made me think differently about, hey, I don't have to follow this or that thing. I can just mix it up and create something differently, and that had a pretty big influence on me in like the mid 2010, 2015 sort of that area.
That was a big era for him. And so when you mentioned about being consistent in the studio, you've got your Days Like Nights radio show, you've got all the productions that you're doing, touring, you're a husband and a father. Like, how do you really manage all that? Because it sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it's like you're juggling all these different things, and sometimes it goes better than other times, but in general, I try to manage by being at home during the week, being away during the weekends, and the radio show takes like 1 day a week. I combine it with listening to all new music and all promos, and then doing the radio show. And I found it actually more difficult these past few years because I was playing so much from like after COVID. My schedule really got bumped up a little bit, and I was playing almost every weekend. And I found it more difficult to finish music. And also being on the road so much, sometimes when I came home, in the old days, I would go straight into the studio. And whereas in the past few years, sometimes when I got home like Sunday night or Monday morning,
probably want to sleep.
Sleep, play Xbox, like do something different.
Switch off. Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to touring, because that can be quite exhausting, what have been some of the highs and lows that you would say over the course of your career?
So it's a good question as well. Some of the highlights, of course, some of the gigs I've done have been crazy. Mont Saint Michel, where I played for Circle with my live show.
That saved me during Corona.
Yeah, and what was even crazier is that usually there's like, 50,000 people a day over there. And when we recorded that, there was 10 people. It was just the team, the Circle team, and some people from Mont Saint Michel. So it was just a crazy experience all over. But something like that, and then some of the shows I've done in Argentina, which are insane as well. The lows for me are more when, shows, you sometimes get shows where you travel for 10 or 12 hours and then you end up playing for 100 people. And it's not that I don't want to, because even though if it's very little people, you try to give everybody the best sort of experience. But sometimes for me, it's when you already travel so much, and then looking back on a show like that, you think, I wish I would just have stayed at home that weekend and just spend some time with the family and in the studio. And so these days, I try to be a little bit more selective of the shows I do. Like I don't want to travel half the globe for a tiny show somewhere, just because I'd rather just spend that time in the studio or with family.
Right. And when it comes to, say, small versus large shows, would you get nervous before a big show, or does that, not really?
Not really, no, not anymore.
You're not, okay, that's good. Because I know some DJs that still get nervous, but that's good that that doesn't affect you.
Only with live shows where there's more things that can go wrong.
Okay.
I'll get a little bit nervous.
Okay.
But with DJ sets, it's like, maybe if it's a very important show, I get a little bit nervous like leading up to it. But funnily enough, every time I get to the stage and I see the setup, they're gone. Yeah, it's
okay.
gone. So I'm not really nervous for DJ gigs anymore.
That's good, because I know that that's something that a lot of other producers have struggled with in the past, of all of a sudden going from the studio and then being in front of 10,000 people. So it's good that that doesn't affect you.
It's not so much nerves, but that big contrast does affect me sometimes. When you spend 10 or more hours, like a whole day traveling just by yourself, and then you spend the night in the hotel by yourself, and you eat by yourself, and then all of a sudden from that setting, just being in your own head for like 24 hours, there's 3,000 people in front of you, and everybody's like amped up, and I'm just, usually I've just woken up, because with the time difference I like to sleep before shows. So that sort of change in mindset, that messes with you sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. But what would you feel? So for example, you've played massive parties in Argentina, and you have like a small one coming up at the end of the month in Scotland for our Skyline friends. That's a very small party. Yeah. So how do you, what do you feel the difference between like a big party, like in Argentina versus a small one?
I mean, they both have their charm. I like the setting of being on a bigger stage and having a whole hall of people dancing to the music, and that feeling is great. But then you don't get that sort of intimate thing that you get at small parties, where people can just come up to you, talk to you, take a picture easily, or just like reach out their hand or something. And so I definitely enjoy both of those. They're both different. There's one sort of show that I've never really enjoyed throughout my career, and it's where you get that intimate vibe, so up to like 500 people or so, but they put you on this massive stage high above the crowd with like lights on you, and I've never enjoyed that.
No. Yeah. I think the best parties are the ones where you can really connect with each other. Yeah. Growing up so you grew up in Rotterdam, right? Yes. Yeah. So, and then how did you see like the progression of night clubbing in the Netherlands? Because I saw, a show a long time ago where in the beginning, people didn't really want to dance. They kind of just stood there like looking cool. And then over time, they slowly started, dancing. Like, how did you see that progression? I always thought, when I started playing in the Netherlands, so this is between like 2003 and 2006 more or less, that it was quite reserved and just like you described. And then throughout the night it would get better. But I feel nowadays it's different. Like people, they come in, they get amped up pretty quickly. And I think that changed somewhere, around early 2010s or so was when I really started to see that change. It could also be my perspective, because of course back in those early days I was playing warm-up sets and people hardly know you back then, whereas now you play a better time slot and people know who you are and they're getting excited to see you. So that could change my experience a little bit, but yeah, I had a similar idea. And did you back then growing up before you really started DJing, did you go to see any of the Dutch DJs, or is there any particular set that really had an impact on you?
There was one show which was my very first like really big event in the Netherlands, and that was 4 Elements in the Rotterdam Ahoy. So this was 2000, and I don't remember the entire lineup, but there was one moment where it was Chesto first, and then, or it was Junkie XL first, and then Chesto afterwards, or maybe the other way around, but it doesn't matter. But that had a big impact on me. It was the first time seeing. I was just under 17, I think. It was the first time seeing a big hall like that and getting those huge PAs, and like every kick sounded like thunderbolts, you know, and it was just insane seeing that sort of energy in a room. And that made after that I started clubbing a lot more.
And then you started DJing. So like, what was that transition? Like, when did you start buying all this equipment?
Yeah, probably more or less the same age. Okay. I was 15 or 16, more or less. I started producing music and DJing at the exact same time. Okay. And I'm a little bit of an introvert person, in a sense that I would never go out and market myself like with my CD, like, hey, you know, I'm a DJ, I'd like to play it. That wasn't really something I did. So in the beginning, I just started making music, and every now and then I'd get a small booking. But as soon as, you know, the tracks were coming out and they were getting sold on vinyl, and that's when the bookings all of a sudden started coming in. So I think I was a little bit earlier with my productions, but it both started around that same time.
Yeah, how did you start giving out your tracks? Like,
well, I grew up with the internet, you know, like an internet nerd, basically. So, you know, I finished music, I looked up record labels that were on the internet, and I sent them emails, and I was surprised at how quickly I was starting to sign music, and that was sort of what I did back in those days. And then every now and then, if it was maybe a Dutch label, I'd go and have a talk or visit them. But like 98% of what I did was just like sending emails and talking to people from my basically my parents' bedroom, you know, where I was making music. Yeah.
And nowadays, you're the one who's receiving a lot of tracks from people that want to be on Days Like Nights. What do you look for?
Something that is unique, something that I haven't really heard before. Like, you know, you get a lot of demos that are really well produced, but they sound like 98% of the records out there already. And then I'm like, well, what's the point of releasing this if every other DJ sounds like this as well? So I'm trying to find, it doesn't have to be perfectly produced, but it needs to stand its own ground, sort of, you know, like excite me and like, hey, I haven't heard this before.
It sounds like something that, you know, what you were saying, like looking for something more timeless. But like, if somebody was to send you something that's like, it still feels like it should have like a Days Like Night sound.
Yeah, well, I think the sound is pretty broad. Like, it goes from almost disco influence to sometimes more techno-ish and sort of all the melody in between. But then again, my DJ sets kind of do that as well. So I guess if the label should be a reflection of what I like to play and what I like to listen to, and that is really broad as well. So I guess the label is broad too, which can be confusing to some people. You know, like if we send out our promos to people, they're like, hey, this is all the way out here and this is all the way out there. You know, what are you about? But yeah, my sets are like that too. So
always danceable though.
Yeah, very, very.
And when I had a question regarding publishing, because I feel like this is a topic that's still confusing for a lot of people. So I know that nowadays, like at all the festivals in the Netherlands, they have to have like this box to like record, like it's like a massive Shazam kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you ever see any money from that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's you're talking about mechanical royalties from playing songs.
Like if other people play your tracks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so all of that is registered by Buma Stemra and like sister organizations around the world. And so ideally it should work that if a track that I produced gets played somewhere, that club plays or pays money to Buma for that, and then they say like, oh, this was his track, so you get paid for that. And like radio works like that, TV works like that, and it's a complicated thing that I know my way around it, but fortunately I have good people that take care of all of that. But yeah, you do get money from that.
Okay, so is that happening around the world, or is like the Dutch really pushing that?
It is happening around the world, but I think we are quite far ahead. Some of the European countries, UK as well, and Germany and Belgium, and I mean, if I play a show somewhere in Latin America, how it should work is that if I play my own track, the club pays something for that to the organization there, and then that money or those tracks are registered worldwide, so they should see like, hey, that money should go to the Netherlands, and then Buma here should send it to me. Doesn't always work like that in reality, but we're slowly getting there.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because there's, obviously a big challenge nowadays, I think, for artists to get paid, especially, with the different streaming sites and just the way that, money management has changed.
Yeah.
How has that impacted you?
Well, I'm of a different opinion than most, I think, because most artists are a little bit negative maybe about streaming portals. And I've released music on vinyl and on CD, so I've seen those royalties as well. But to be honest, I'm making more from streaming nowadays than I was from CDs and vinyl back in the days. And the problem is, all of it is based on sort of the algorithmic approach, So if for instance, I have a track like Transmission that's doing really well, then the streaming portals are more eager to put your next track like in public playlists as well, and that's basically what gets the whole thing going. But I'm personally not opposed to streaming, and I quite like it. And a big difference for me is, for instance, like if in the old days, if someone bought your album on CD, you would get paid for that once, of course, but that's it. You'd never get paid for that again. Whereas with streaming, as an artist, you build your own catalog of music. And say that I'm retired, I don't know, 30 years from now, just naming a number. If people are still streaming that music, you still get paid for every single stream that plays. So in essence, it's maybe a fairer product, I think. So personally, I quite like it.
Okay, yeah, well that's good to hear that that's working for you. And so, what we have the summer ahead of us. What you have a big touring schedule coming up?
Yeah, the start of this year was a little bit slow, but I also really needed time to finish the album and work on my live set, which I kind of just got done in time. And now from the second half of May onwards and June, it's going to get busier again. So like here in the Netherlands, I'm playing Woodstock in June.
Yes.
That's always a really good party.
Yes.
Playing Loveland this year.
Yeah.
And then abroad, going to Eastern Europe again. Scotland, like you said, and
Balance.
Balance in Croatia.
Yeah.
And there's a lot coming up. I'm always really bad at thinking of all these shows.
At remembering. Do you keep a schedule for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I, like in the beginning of the year, I cancel, like I sort of open the whole schedule and I block out weekends, like I want to be free here and I want to be free there. And I never used to do that. And then I'd end up playing 52 weeks a year. And that got a little bit much. So now I'm balancing it a little bit better.
Yeah. Do you set like personal goals for yourself like every year, or
no, I'm more of sort of go with the flow sort of person. So I goals are probably like, you're working on the album or working on the live show, and we do set dates, of course, to finish those sort of things. But I don't really set out goals like, oh, I'd like to do this year, or I'd like to play there or so. I kind of just see how it goes and go with the stream, go with the flow. Yeah.
And do you, like, outside of like your touring, do you have like, say a bucket list of things that you would like to do in terms of, I don't know, adventures or anything that you'd like to see or do?
It's remarkably small.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were always, you know, there were a lot of things on it in the past, and it was stuff like, music-wise, it was stuff like get a gold record or release, you know, and a song album or those sort of things. But as the years progress, I've been able to like tick off quite a few. I think music-wise, there's only one left on there, and that is get a Grammy at some point, which is like right up there. Yeah. So I don't know if it ever gets ticked off, but you gotta aim for something, high, you know.
For sure.
And apart from that, like in my own life, I just try to have a little bit more fun. So I think when I started out, I was working 7 days a week or so. You're just very, very focused on trying to make music and trying to play. And now when I'm not in the studio or traveling, I just try to do what I enjoy, you know, like playing video games with my daughter or stuff like that. Just the small things.
The small things that count, yeah. The market is incredibly saturated nowadays. I think, you know, you probably notice yourself, like you're getting like so many promos, and it's also really hard for, you know, probably up and coming producers to get noticed and, you know, and to get those gigs. What kind of advice would you give?
I always say the same thing when they ask me. It's like quality over quantity. Yeah. Yeah, because it's like you said, the market is incredibly saturated. There's so many people releasing music that it's really hard to get noticed. So the only way you're really gonna get noticed is if you're doing something different from everybody else. And you know, as you've probably seen as well, like one big track in 1 year can do so much more for you than like 30 tracks in that same year that are sort of just, you know, good or average. So yeah, I always say like you gotta work on something unique and just put quality first, and you know, everything else comes second.
And how would you feel that like personal relationships have helped in your career? So for example, you've had a manager for a very, very long time throughout the whole time, and you have, you know, a great relationship with Armada. Yeah. How would you feel that like getting into these relationships helped you?
It's really important. Like I would never have achieved all the things that I have achieved if it wasn't for my manager, but also for Armada and for my wife, for instance, and all of those relationships. My wife and I are together for 19 years now. With my manager Jeroen, we've been working together for 17, I think. And so I'm the sort of person, like if things are good, I don't go hopping around trying to find the next best thing, you know. And I think that is important. Like that's not to say that if something is not working, you shouldn't switch or so. But I think if you're working for a very long time with the same people, there's like mutual trust, and you know what is expected of you and what is expected of the other one, and you can really build on that. So I think you've gotten lucky in finding the right people early on, because it is very difficult for some people to know who to trust. Yeah. Especially you know, in the music industry, it can be very difficult. Yeah. What do you have? Do you have like you finished the album, and now like are you already working on new stuff? Are you taking a break? Well, I was sort of redesigning the studio a little bit, and I'm sort of half done with that. So I can write music again, but slowly paced at the moment. For the album, we're now working on remixes, so I'm doing some of them myself. Like on the extended album, there's already a few like club mixes, and I think I want to add maybe one or two more that are just a little bit easier to play on the dance floor. Then we'll get other artists for remixes on board as well, of course. And I think I'm going to be mostly working just on singles now. Like whenever I've done an album, and this was the 5th one, I'm just done with writing album music for a while. So I think I'm just going to focus on individual tracks for a little bit.
And when you are tired and chilling out, or in your traveling, what kind of music do you like to listen to?
Anything that's non-dance music.
Yeah. Like, what kind of examples do you have? Like, what would be on your playlist?
It can be a lot of different things. Editors and Muse are always on my playlist. And to be honest, like, so many different things. Like, whatever I enjoy, I give it like a little heart on Spotify, and then I just put the whole thing on random.
Yeah, that's what I do. I would never remember I have like a whole indie dance mix that I would never remember the names of unless they were stuck in there.
Exactly, yeah. No, but in general, I think outside of the studio, I listen to a little bit more indie rock, indie pop, sort of somewhere in the crossover with the synthesizers, white stripes, white lies, those sort of things.
This has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time, and have an amazing summer. And I can't wait to see you. You'll see me on the dance floor.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
EG, where music matters.